Imagine a country so vast it could swallow most of Europe whole. A land of endless forests, jagged mountains, icy tundra, and more lakes than the rest of the world combined. Now imagine that almost no one lives in most of it. Canada. Massive, mysterious, and mostly empty. But why? Why does nearly 80% of this country, one of the most developed in the world, remain untouched, uninhabited, and wild? Is it the cold, the isolation, something deeper, woven into the fabric of its history and geography? Today, we're diving into the hidden truths behind one of the world's strangest population puzzles. If you love fascinating explorations like this, or are fascinated by geography, geopolitics, or just love a good deep dive into the world's biggest mysteries, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're pulling back the curtain, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Canada's northern regions face a climate that most people would struggle to endure year-round. Winters in places like Nunavut or northern Quebec can drop below -40 degrees Celsius, with blizzards, icy winds, and permafrost. Even in summer, the growing season is short, often just 6 to 8 weeks, making agriculture nearly impossible. This extreme cold isn't just uncomfortable, it impacts infrastructure. Building roads or housing in permafrost zones requires costly engineering, and maintaining them is even harder. Transporting food, fuel, and other necessities becomes expensive and logistically difficult. While Indigenous communities have adapted for generations, most Canadians live where survival isn't a daily battle. That's why over 85% of the population lives within 200 kilometers of the U.S. border, where the climate is milder. Northern Canada may be beautiful and rugged, but the harsh weather acts like a wall, discouraging large-scale settlement and development. Canada's landscape is as stunning as it is inaccessible. The country boasts over 2 million lakes, dense boreal forests, sprawling mountain ranges, and vast stretches of tundra. While this creates iconic scenery, it also makes much of the land extremely hard to develop or even reach. In northern and central regions, entire areas are dotted with bogs, marshes, or shield rock, left behind by glaciers during the last ice age. Building roads or railways across such unstable ground is expensive and often impractical. The Canadian Shield alone covers almost half the country and is notoriously tough for agriculture or construction. Add to that massive stretches of wilderness with no connecting infrastructure, and it's easy to see why people concentrate in the south. Geography may bless Canada with natural beauty, but it also traps much of the country in inaccessibility, isolating huge areas from population growth. The way Canada was settled from the beginning has left a lasting impact on where people live. Early European settlers, mainly the French and British, focused their colonies along the Atlantic coast and the fertile St. Lawrence River Valley. As time went on, settlement expanded westward along the southern prairies and Pacific coast, all areas with milder climates and arable land. The northern interior, on the other hand, was largely ignored except for fur trading posts and some mining ventures. Infrastructure like the railways and highways was built to connect these southern hubs, reinforcing the growth of cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. The northern regions were left out of the development boom, with fewer incentives for new settlers. Even now, population density in Canada remains tied to these original colonial settlement zones. In essence, history drew an invisible line across the map, and everything above it was left behind. Try getting to some of Canada's more remote regions, and you'll quickly see how infrastructure limits growth. Roads and railways are sparse in the north, and many communities are accessible only by air or seasonal ice roads. For example, in Nunavut, Canada's largest and newest territory, there are no roads connecting its 25 communities. That's right, none. Even in provinces like Ontario or British Columbia, northern towns often depend on long, winding highways that are prone to closure in winter storms. Without reliable transportation, it's nearly impossible to build large industries, attract new residents, or ensure consistent access to healthcare and education. This isolation means higher costs for everything, from groceries to gasoline. Most people simply aren't willing to endure that level of remoteness when cities in the South offer better access to jobs, services, and amenities. Until infrastructure catches up, which could take decades, the North will remain mostly empty. Canada's economic engine runs in the South. Major industries like finance, tech, film, and manufacturing are centered in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. These urban hubs attract the majority of the workforce, and by extension the population. Meanwhile, the northern regions rely heavily on resource-based industries, mining, forestry, and oil extraction, which are seasonal, volatile, and require far fewer permanent workers. Even when high-paying jobs exist in these sectors, they often involve fly-in fly-out schedules, meaning employees don't actually live in the region full-time. The lack of economic diversity in remote areas discourages long-term settlement. Add to that the high cost of living and limited access to amenities, and it's easy to understand why few people see the North as a place to put down roots. Without major investment in new sustainable industries, these parts of Canada will remain rich in resources but poor in permanent population. Hey, if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who loves peeling back the layers of our world, and I appreciate you for that. I'm curious, which of these reasons has surprised you the most so far? Do you think Canada should develop its North more, or is it better left wild and untouched? Let's start a discussion down in the comments. I read every one. And while you're there, don't forget to drop a like if you're enjoying the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've got more content on the way exploring the mysteries of geography, history, and how the world really works. So if you have a topic you'd love to see covered next, let me know. Now back to the list, because the story of Canada's emptiness only gets wilder from here. Farming is a foundation for population growth. Historically, towns and cities sprout where agriculture thrives. In Canada, that foundation is limited to a narrow strip of land in the south. The country has a surprisingly small percentage of arable land. Only about 7% is suitable for farming, and most of that is found in southern Ontario, Quebec, and the Prairie provinces. North of this belt, the growing season is too short, the soil is too thin, or the terrain is simply unsuitable. Without farming, there's little incentive for people to settle in those regions long term. Food has to be imported, and that drives up living costs. This geographic limitation reinforces a cycle. No farms means no local food supply, which means no affordable living, which means no population growth. In a land this vast, it's almost ironic that so little of it can support something as basic as a wheat field. Canada takes its natural beauty seriously, and rightly so. Over 11% of the country's land is protected by national and provincial parks, conservation reserves, and wildlife areas. That's more than 1.1 million square kilometers where permanent human settlement is heavily restricted or outright banned. Iconic areas like Banff, Jasper, and Algonquin are carefully preserved, not just for tourism, but to protect delicate ecosystems and endangered species. These regions are deliberately left untouched to maintain biodiversity and serve as carbon sinks. While this is a win for the environment, it also limits where people can live, work, or build. Combine that with zoning laws, Indigenous land agreements, and conservation efforts, and large portions of the country are effectively off-limits. Canada is consciously choosing to keep parts of itself empty, not because it has no use for the land, but because its best use is staying wild and untouched. Life in Canada's remote and northern areas doesn't come cheap. In communities like Iqaluit or Yellowknife, everyday items cost 2 to 3 times more than in cities like Toronto or Calgary. A jug of milk can easily reach $12, and fresh produce is often flown in, resulting in sky-high prices. Fuel is more expensive, housing materials have to be imported, and even internet access can be slow and costly. These expenses quickly add up, making it hard for residents to justify staying, let alone attracting new settlers. While government subsidies and programs help offset costs in Indigenous communities, they don't close the gap entirely. The economics just don't make sense for most people. Why pay more to live in an isolated area with fewer job opportunities and limited services? Until the cost of living is addressed in a meaningful way, most Canadians will choose affordability and convenience over frontier life. Much of Canada's northern and remote land is not empty in the cultural sense. It's home to hundreds of Indigenous communities with deep ancestral connections to the land. These areas are often governed by different systems under land treaties and self-governance agreements. In places like Nunavut, which is over 85% Indigenous, land use is managed by Inuit organizations in partnership with territorial and federal governments. While these communities may be small in population, they are vibrant centers of culture, language, and tradition. Importantly, many of them prefer to maintain their autonomy and resist large-scale development that could disrupt their way of life. This means that even if land is technically available, it may not be accessible for external settlement or commercial use. Canada's efforts to reconcile with its Indigenous peoples include respecting these boundaries. So when we say empty, we must remember that emptiness is often intentional and respectfully preserved. People go where opportunities thrive, and in Canada, that means the South. Over 90% of Canadians live within a few hundred kilometers of the U.S. border, and the three largest metropolitan areas, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, alone account for over one-third of the population. These cities offer jobs, education, healthcare, culture, entertainment, and most importantly, connectivity. With immigration being a key driver of Canada's population growth, new arrivals tend to settle where existing communities and infrastructure already exist. Rural areas, especially in the north, struggle to attract and retain newcomers, creating a feedback loop. Fewer people means fewer services, which discourages new settlers and so on. Urban sprawl continues to dominate Canada's growth patterns, and until major economic or environmental shifts occur, the South will continue to thrive while the rest of the country remains sparsely populated. It's not that people can't live elsewhere, it's that the pull of the cities is just too strong. So, there you have it. 10 reasons why 80% of Canada remains empty, wild, and almost untouched. It's a story of nature's power, history's direction, and a country that never quite filled in its map. But maybe that's the magic of it. Maybe Canada isn't empty. It's just open, vast, and holding space for something bigger than cities and highways. If you found this video interesting, thought-provoking, or even a little mind-blowing, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe for more curious content, and share this video with someone who still thinks Canada is just maple syrup and hockey. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you most, and where do you think people should live in the future? Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious.